Hi everyone, it's great to see so many of you here this evening. So I'm the Digital Delivery Lead for the NHS Leadership Academy. We're a multidisciplinary team, about 24 people, and we build and run virtual learning environments to deliver our leadership development programs in a kind of blended learning, flipped classroom way. And our client base is about 1.4 million customers in the NHS, so there's 1.4 million people in the NHS, and then a further kind of 2.9 million people in social care. So we've got quite a lot of people to try and get trained up on leadership development programs, and through that we're kind of aspiring to create better care in the NHS. So similar to Parallax, we run a Kubernetes cluster across Google Cloud, across AWS, mostly PHP development, lots of good stuff going on like modern CI/CD pipeline. So more than happy to talk to you about technology and how we're really not a traditional NHS IT team. You know, a lot of times the NHS is getting slated for how archaic the IT is. Some places that's the case, but other places there's a lot of really cool cutting edge AI, machine learning. So as well as so that's some of the work we're doing. Also working across government with government digital service, working on how we adopt and use better standards to make government and health services more accessible and easier for citizens to use. We also run one of the UK's best graduate management training schemes. So if you're looking for a perhaps different way into a career today, we're currently recruiting for next year's intake, and there's loads of really good new opportunities for informatics. So if you're an Excel spreadsheet whiz, like James was talking about, or you're really into doing digital stuff, they're going to be developing new digital pathways into the NHS for some really exciting careers. But I want to talk to you about something slightly different for the next, say, 12 or so minutes. And I want us to think about why the how of our work is as important as what we actually do. So as we're perhaps looking for jobs, looking at companies to go and work with, people to work for, what is it we want to be asking about how they do their work, as well as the exciting work that they're doing. And I want to start that piece by telling you quite a personal story. This is my story, and about 6 years ago, sort of coming up for sort of November, December time, I got out of bed for the first time and went back to work, having been in bed for the best part of 4 months. So at the end of 2012, I thought my career was really on track. You know, I've got this amazing career in a digital agency. I'd recovered from being made redundant in a secondary school. Spent a few years building up this digital agency, bringing a lot of my friends into it. We've got a lot of clients, not quite on the scale of Parallax, but you know, doing similar kinds of work, really exciting work. Life seemed good. I was happy, enjoyed it. It gave me a lot of flexibility to travel, to work in different places. But just before Christmas, it turned out that the finances of that agency weren't what I and all the other employees had been led to believe. There was an issue. We hadn't really been playing the tax man, which is kind of a bad thing. And 2 weeks before Christmas, there was no money left for anybody to receive their wages. I brought a lot of friends into that agency in good faith that it was a really good company to work for, and I was absolutely devastated. I worked all the way through Christmas, New Year. We sold off part of the company to try and salvage something for my friends and fellow colleagues. And sometime in the first week in January, I got into bed and I never really wanted to see the world again. The 4 months I spent in that bed were some of the darkest and most painful days of my life. I was diagnosed with depression. I was offered medication I hated. And basically I don't remember like functioning or doing anything for those 4 months. So you might be sat there saying, well, this is a digital jobs fair, why on earth are you talking to me about mental health? I'm sure I'm not the only person here who's ever suffered mental ill health. And a third of sick notes that were issued by GPs between 2014 and 2017 were for mental health or mental health related illness. And it's estimated that mental ill health costs the UK taxpayer about £35 billion a year. So if we're talking about successful careers, building successful companies, then actually, taking care of people's mental well-being, I think is really important, and finding companies that will work with you and support your mental well-being is really important. And hopefully, by starting some conversations today, we can start to make that statistic a bit better. There's lots of things that can trigger mental ill health: bereavement, breakdowns in relationships, having children, health scares, physical illness, might be starting a new job, coping with increases in workload, poor relationships with your colleagues, redundancy, the list goes on. And I think in the tech industry particularly, it's quite easy for us to avoid the signs of mental ill health and just let that go unseen. Because despite the fact that we're more connected than ever, we've got devices on our wrists, devices on our watches, we're sat in front of devices all day, we've got Slack, we've got Skype, we're constantly on video calls. A lot of the time, as a person who works for a company that employs 1.4 million people, I spend a heck of a lot of time on my own. And I think a lot of people in the tech industry spend a lot of time working in isolation. It might be staying alone when you're traveling for work, or just being in an organization or a company where there's no one you feel you're able to talk to. Today, I'm in a much better place, I'm glad to say. That's not to say that everything's fine, despite the fact that I love my job, that I work with amazing people, and that we've got work that really fits with my values and that I feel passionate about. There are still dark days, and I don't feel like myself, and I don't feel I can be the best that I can be. But that's okay, and together we can help one another. And mental ill health doesn't have to be something that stops us from having a fulfilling career. So what can we do to help? Well, firstly, I think it helps if we know ourselves and we take some time to look after ourselves. So a few years back, somebody said to me, can you tell me how you feel? And I just stood there like I had no vocabulary to describe feelings or what was going on inside of me, or how that was making me respond to the world. And I really had to stop and consider what my response should be or how I could figure that out. And I've worked really hard over the last few years to develop that vocabulary about how I'm feeling and kind of help me understand what's kind of going on with my body and my mind. And the first step that you might take is just to ask yourself, once every day, how do I feel today? And just give yourselves a few minutes to, a few minutes away from your normal routine to consider that question. Once you've got some kind of handle on how you're feeling, I think try and notice what makes that feeling better, what makes that feeling worse, and then the things that make you feel better, try and do a bit more of them. And don't write massive plans that you're going to fail at, but just incremental shifts, little by little. Just focus on things that might help you unwind, help you get away, create some headspace, and try and work out then how to regularly incorporate that into your working patterns and your life. For me, I like to spend some time in my shed. You might have wondered why there was a massive picture of a shed on the screen. I'm really fortunate enough to have a huge shed. It's 144 square feet of crisp space, and it's full of bikes and oil and sawdust and tools and bits of wood I can make stuff out of. There isn't a computer in sight, there isn't Wi-Fi out there, and kind of for half a day or half an hour I can just go out there, chill out, just potter around and just have some me time. Now that might sound like bliss to you. You might have a shed yourself, you might wish you had a shed, or it might sound like a bit of a nightmare for you. And we're all different, and I think it's important, therefore, that we kind of find what it is that does that for us, that gives us opportunity to get away from the day-to-day, to create some headspace and to help ourselves out. It might be climbing, it might be riding a bike, exercise, painting, gardening. There's so many activities and things people can do. But kind of spend some time thinking about what it is that you do that gives you that space. And also, I think if you're in digital or you're thinking about a digital career, I think one thing that we need to know is it's okay to be offline sometimes. Now, obviously, flexibility is important, but we need to find time when we can be offline, and we need to believe that for ourselves and for the teams that we work in and that we might be managing. There's lots of things I think we can do in our workplaces to support one another. And I think asking one another, a simple question, how are you today, is a really good way to do that. Now, I don't mean kind of the average walking down the corridor in the morning, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine, yep, you, yeah, okay, yeah, straight off. Sort of no time for one another. Like, actually stop and ask someone, how are you feeling today? And actually be prepared to listen and perhaps not respond or not react, but just give one another space to say, how is this for you? How is working here? How is your life at the moment? If you look at me on this stage today, I bet you can't tell me which hotel I stayed in last night, or what music I was listening to as I walked here, or what I had for lunch. And if you can't tell those really trivial things looking at me on this stage, then how could we possibly know, like, what's going on with somebody, how they're feeling? Did I have an argument with my wife last night? Am I absolutely hating my job? I've had a recent family bereavement that's just really getting me down, or that there's some finance issue that's really burdening me. And if we don't offer each other those opportunities to say, how are you feeling, how are you doing, then how will we ever be able to figure that out? At the NHS Leadership Academy, many of us use check-ins in our meetings. So when we have a team meeting, we just have a few minutes each at the beginning of the meeting, just to say how we are and anything we want to name so that the team are aware. It's not for response, it's not for conversation, it's just, this is me and this is what I want you to know so that I can be me in this workplace. Myself and a number of other colleagues have also been on a 2-day mental health first aid training course. So Mental Health First Aid England run an amazing 2-day course. And I'm sure in most workplaces, most educational establishments will all have physical first aiders around us. But you're actually statistically far more likely to come across somebody in a mental ill health situation or a mental health crisis than you are having a heart attack. And yet how many officers have got defibrillators and people trained to do CPR, and yet we don't necessarily have the right people to provide mental health first aid. So I'd really recommend you looking that program up, and maybe if it's not for you, asking the company that you're looking for a job with, do you have mental health first aiders in your organization? Or are you willing to train some mental health first aiders? I've seen firsthand that paying attention to mental well-being can have a positive impact on people's lives. Our work environments and overall creativity, productivity, I think they're all improved when people have got good mental well-being. And I think helping employees, colleagues, friends to take care and look after their own mental health and have access to appropriate support, it's really important, and it doesn't need to cost a lot of money. There's a lot of very easy, simple, and often free things that we can do to improve that. So to finish my talk, I want to ask a few things. Is it okay for someone you work with to say, I'm having a bad day today? If they did, how would you respond? Maybe consider setting a reminder on your phone. I now notice my Apple Watch asks me to breathe a couple of times a day. So maybe something like that drives you mad. Maybe that's helpful, maybe a reminder. And just once a day say, how do I feel? And just allow yourselves a few minutes to answer that question. And lastly, and I think most importantly, when you go home tonight, ask, where's my shed? Thank you.